All right, welcome back to Translate This with your host, Melissa, and
Lauren.
all right, this is a podcast about language, culture, life, and the hilarity of it all. Because why? Because why not laugh? We need this in life. And we won't bore you with all of the wonderful little things that we can do over here with our webpage and our Facebook and our Instagram. We'll give you all of that on the link. But we have much more important things to do because we have another spectacular guest. And I'm very excited to read a little bit about the person that we will be speaking with today. Daniel Welsh is our wonderful guest today who grew up, according to Daniel, on a depressing patch of desert outside of Phoenix, Arizona. Me being one that lived in Arizona, I completely get that. That resonates quite well with me.
Oh, yeah.
Seeking adventure, he moved to Madrid when he was 21. He became an English teacher, as one does, and eventually started a network of blogs that have reached millions of English learners around the world. His books are perennial sellers on Amazon, and his podcast, Aprende Más Inglés, which means Learn More English, has recently celebrated 300 episodes.
Wow.
Huge, huge. When he's not teaching English on the interwebs, he often writes about expat life in Spain on his blog, The Chorizo, or Chorizo, depending on where you're from in Latin America, Chronicles, and the accompanying podcast that goes with it, Spain to Go. He lives in Barcelona with his wife, where he spends his time reading, drinking coffee, and practicing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. That's amazing. I hadn't
Wow.
any idea about that last part, so I'm going to definitely be asking about that. So just to jump into this, which that's a very eclectic background. I love this very much. I just want to preface what we're going to get into because we've been talking a lot that this season on Translate This is going to be a lot about expats living in Spain and expats in general because we wanted to have a united focus this season on what it is that we want to bring to our listeners. So I did a little research and I found out that in 2023, and I'm not sure, Daniel or Lauren, if you know this, there have a registry of foreigners from North America living in Spain. And we apparently from the United States, those of us who are here, mostly are coming from the West Coast, and there's about 36,000 residents here that have moved over
Wow.
and moved into Spain. So that's a very interesting statistic, and also the fact that there was a 13% jump in moving in the last 3 years, and there's just more of us apparently coming over to Spain. So I guess
Post-COVID.
yeah, well, maybe, but the question that I'm going to ask Daniel, because he was way ahead of us. Daniel, you were 20 years ago. You said, okay, so why Spain? And I heard it might be a rumor around the internet that it could have been for a relationship. So let's start with that.
Yeah. Well, first off, thank you for inviting me to be on your show. Why Spain is kind of a difficult question. I like to abbreviate a little bit by just saying it was for this girl, but that's a gross simplification. The longer story is I was 21. I would have done some other stupid thing if it hadn't been moved to Spain. So this was just a terrible idea that worked out very well in hindsight. But I was young, I dropped out of college, my girlfriend dumped me, and I came to Spain with my dad because my dad had, just wanted to see Europe. You know how Americans think they're going to see Europe in 2 weeks.
Yeah. Yeah.
And here in Spain, I met a girl who was from, another European country. She was an exchange student or something, and we hit it off. And I found myself back on that depressing patch of desert thinking, what if I just went to Spain and tried to be with that girl? Having said that, it could have gone in any number of directions. I considered going to Argentina, but Like the minimal internet we had 20 years ago told me that Argentina was in the middle of a big crisis. So I didn't go there, and Spain looked like the economy was going great. So here I am.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. And so I'm sure people want to know, how'd that work out with that relationship?
It never really worked out. We hung out for a while. We have very different personality types, um, and different lifestyle expectations. Also, European people have these highly subsidized lives that if you're from the
Yeah.
middle of a desert, you're not used to that kind of thing, and it
No.
ends up being kind of a point of contention, I
Right.
guess. So
Right.
I was never actually with that girl officially.
Okay.
We hung out
But
for a while, and then I moved on and did other stuff, but stayed in Spain for, a long series of other reasons, which
right.
half of them were girls, basically. And, it's been 20 years. So at this point,
But you're
I
married
don't know.
now.
I am married. Yes.
Yeah.
I'm
And
married to my wife is Indian. So that's a whole different
oh,
story.
wow. Well, that's
Yeah.
a very, very exciting mix of
Cultures
yeah,
and
yeah, yeah. I really like that because you came to Spain, and from everything that I've read about you online, you are really Mr. Spain from from what I can tell.
Mr.
And
Spain.
Mr. Spain, I know we're going to get into your nickname here about Mr. Chorizo because I love that. And that's how I discovered you, were the Chorizo Chronicles. And, being of Latin American roots, I still say Chorizo. I'm still struggling with the here over in Spain. It's just doesn't roll off my tongue as it maybe should. But yes, so I was really intrigued by your interest in everything Spanish, not just the language, which we'll get to here in a second, but also the culture, the politics, and things that are happening globally that are affecting people in Spain. And so I'm very curious as to, now that you've revealed this about your wife, did you meet her in, because you were in Madrid at first and then you moved to
Yeah.
Barcelona. Did you meet her in Barcelona? Was it a
No, we met
client?
in Madrid. It's
Oh,
it's a whole thing. She came to Spain for a PhD program, and she was studying in Madrid. And she read one of my articles on the Chorizo Chronicles also.
okay.
wow.
Okay.
She, added me as a Facebook friend, as people were doing back in those days.
Yeah.
And, one thing led to another. I was just like, oh, who's this girl who's adding me as a Facebook friend? But one thing led to the other. And now we're living in Barcelona and we're married.
Wow.
I
That's
like
amazing.
to, well, not that I like to, I spend a lot of time thinking about the complete randomness of life.
Mhm.
And I'm
Mhm.
not sure if my life is more or less random than other people's, but it certainly does have a lot of randomness. So that's
Yeah.
part of it.
Oh,
Well,
yeah.
I mean,
I'm a
that's Lauren, what does that remind you of? Whose story
I'm a
does that
big fan
remind
of
you
the
of?
random life
Y
myself, so
Right,
I'm on
right.
that same route.
Yeah.
Yeah,
There's no
yeah.
reason why I mean, there's no better reason why I picked Spain either. It just kind of it was just there and random, and also a boy was involved, so very similar kind of path, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you're familiar with a book called The Unbearable Lightness of Being
Yes. Yes.
by Milan Kundera, the female protagonist in that, I think her name is Teresa, she sits around being like tortured by the long series of coincidences that get her together with her eventual husband.
Right.
And I reread this recently, and I was like, that's not a very long series of coincidences compared to what
No.
I've got going on.
Right.
And if you're going to torture yourself about how it's all just random, like, I don't know. I'm not sure that's productive, and I think that's just how the universe works.
oh, yeah.
Atoms
Well,
bouncing off each other in the void type thing.
I do think that whatever the situation that has caused you to get to where you're at, I will say that it's become a very successful random set of events, and you seem
Totally.
very well implanted into what you're doing. And I really do like reading not just the fact that you have engaged with the language, but you've engaged again with society, which I think sometimes, and I know that maybe some people who aren't expats don't understand that difference. There's a lot of us that move to other countries and we engage with immediately the language. We have to learn the language. We want to know about it and whatnot, but we don't really engage with the culture. We don't really mesh in with the locals. And I know that you have done that and you continually do this because one of the things that I was incredibly impressed with is the amount of books that you have published, best-selling author. You have just a ton of books on learning Spanish. And to your
Learning
credit,
English.
oh, sorry, learning English. Yes, learning English. I need the one. I need the one to learn Spanish. I was unfortunately raised by a mom that thought, well, my child won't be a child of an immigrant, so I'm not going to teach her my native language. So I've had to
Mm,
learn Spanish on my own, which was, it's been very challenging.
that's
But
very common from what I've heard.
it's incredibly common. It's incredibly common,
Yeah.
and it's just again, it's an issue, especially in the United States. You don't wanna have a child that's looked down upon there, and so if you don't teach them your native language, then they can't be called bilingual or can't be marginalized as other. But here in Spain, people are just jumping and hollering and trying to learn as much English as they can, and I think that you really clued into something because most people, and I don't know, you can tell me what you think about this, but a lot of people assume Europeans speak 5 languages. So, they're all multilingual and they all
Yeah.
turn around and they all speak English. So you don't have to learn anything as an American when you go to Europe because they're gonna speak English. But as we know, that's not true. And what we also know about Spain, and maybe it's just the Iberian Peninsula, although Portugal, I would say they speak much more English than the Spaniards do. The Spanish really don't speak a lot of English unless they're in metropolitan cities and have to for work. And especially out here in Galicia, there's not a lot of English going down. So you have caused me to rethink about my perspective on how important it is to publish your own materials as an English teacher. I wanna know about that. Was it because you just didn't like what was out there, or was this an opportunity for you to make money, or was it a combo? What was the relationship that you had with what you were using to teach? What made you write that first book?
What made me write that first book? The first book was about phrasal verbs, and really, I just thought, what if I wrote a book about phrasal verbs? Um, it's true that I didn't like the materials out there because they were all just like super boring.
Mm,
Yeah.
And I'm actually not sure if I made this first book any more interesting, but I at least added a little bit of personality to it. And I had just discovered that anybody could publish a book on Amazon Kindle and
yeah.
thought, well, maybe I'll make a little money off of this.
Mhm, mhm.
And maybe I don't know. I wasn't really planning on making a whole career out of publishing books because I wasn't planning on anything. My main objective was to start a website
Mhm.
which would make me look impressive to people who might want to pay me a lot of money for private lessons.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
And two things happened. One was that Spain got into this giant economic crisis, which
Mhm,
made everybody much more price conscious.
Oh,
mhm.
yeah.
And so my dream of, charging 40 euros an hour or whatever for private lessons never happened. And secondly, I found that I was getting a lot of like web traffic from people in Mexico, Colombia, Argentina, Latin
Interesting.
America,
Yeah.
and other parts of Spain. And there was no way for me to give them classes. So
Mm-mm.
I started thinking, like, how do I turn this audience into a stream of income,
Yeah.
Mhm, mhm.
as the kids are saying these days? I mean, the third thing that happened, now that I think about it, well, that's a longer story. Um, let's stick with those two
What's
things,
different, though?
and
Yeah,
if it
I
comes
like
up,
those 2 things. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, And the thing about it, and let's back this up because the first book was published in 2013?
2011, maybe. I
2011.
think if you've seen 2013, it's probably the 3rd edition or whatever that,
Okay.
you know, uh, that I did afterwards. Because I did a couple of very, quick sort of first draft books, and when people started buying them, I went
Mhm.
back and made them
Yeah.
better.
Oh shit. I'm gonna
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I
I'm
wasn't really expecting anybody to buy these things. So once people started buying them, I wanted to make something, that
yeah.
I was actually proud to put my name on, and
Yeah.
that's what I did.
Well, that's the thing of it. In 2011, we weren't in this age of everyone's working remotely
Right.
and podcasting, right? Or having virtual meetings all the time. So it was a completely different situation. So for you to figure out to get these up on Amazon during the Kindle generation, that is huge. So, it's very, very prolific of you to do that at that moment in your life, especially since you're just out there hustling. You're out there like, how do I make this happen? I want to stay in Spain. I'm making my way in life. And that takes a lot of courage. So I applaud you for doing so. And it goes to another point that I have, and Lauren and I discussed this a lot, that not everybody has to go through traditional education. Titles and college
Yeah.
degrees
Oh,
are
man.
not, yeah, they're not necessarily the way for everyone, and it doesn't mean that you are lesser than because you don't have a PhD on your wall.
I've got a lot
So
of thoughts about that.
good. Tell me some.
Well, so recently I've been I've become aware that I've been teaching for a long time, and I've been doing all this stuff, and virtually everyone else in this field has some fancy degree in something or other.
Mm,
And I didn't think I was like so alone over here in this corner of like people with no degree.
mhm,
And so I've kind of become aware of the unspoken assumptions of people with fancy degrees about how you need to get a fancy degree and you like need someone's permission to teach anyone anything.
mhm.
And I was thinking about it. I'm like, the most important lessons I've gotten in my life have been from martial arts teachers who are
Nice.
generally like off duty taxi drivers who go to a gym for a few hours a week and, teach boxing or karate, or and now I'm
Mhm,
doing jujitsu. And it's like that
mhm.
was far more educational than anything I did at, my 13 years of formal education.
Right,
I'm also old
right.
enough that all of the teachers in my schools, they didn't know
Mhm.
how computers worked. So literally everything I've done on a computer over the years has been self-taught also.
Self-taught, yeah.
Nothing to do with we learned the fact that HTTP stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol in my high school, and that was about as far as our knowledge of the internet got. And I still have no idea what to do with that bit of information.
Yeah. Right.
But that was like the advanced stuff in those days.
Oh my goodness. So, okay, so let's date you here. So you moved here in 2004 and you were 21. So you
21.
graduated high school then in what year then?
2001. Spent
2001.
yeah, I spent 1 year at Tulane University in New Orleans.
Great school.
Prefacing all of this stuff by, all of the stuff about how the education system is, I don't know, do you use profanity on your podcast?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
We
So,
encourage it.
so the education system is total bullshit.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I was not aware of this until, well, no, I was. I was not aware that there was anything else I could do until I got, off in New Orleans, far from any adult authority figures, and
Mhm.
realized that
Mhm.
I was just very bored with this whole thing. And it was also going to, cost me a lot of money to have these people give me lists of books to read.
Yep.
Mhm.
So
Yep.
I was always a very good student, mainly because, like, I don't know, reading and taking tests is not actually hard. And so, I got into a good university. I thought this is the only path that anybody could possibly take. And my main
Mhm.
goal was just to get out of the desert.
Yeah, yeah.
So, I achieved the getting out of the desert thing, realized that there were all kinds of other life paths that I could take once I was out of there, and
Right.
started finding them, basically.
And, that's incredibly important for especially Lauren's generation. We talk about Gen Xers and we talk about millennials because you are technically Gen X, I think.
I am
I think
technically
Millennial.
the oldest millennial.
oh, you're
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
oldest? Okay, there you go. See, I'm technically the oldest Gen X. So Lauren's almost
I'm 31, so
yeah,
I'm
so you're
I'm kind of a
almost
younger
Gen
millennial,
Z.
but
Yeah.
I
Younger
definitely don't
millennial.
identify as Gen Z.
I
So,
was I've spent so much time hearing about millennials being, the big problem in society, that when I'm
Yeah.
talking
oh
about
yeah.
younger people, I'm also just like, "Oh, these millennials."
Oh
But,
yeah.
like, I forget that I'm supposed to be a millennial also. But yeah, I turned 18 in the year 2000, so I guess millennial
Yeah.
is exactly what I am.
Yeah, well,
Well,
see, that's definitely true because, and I understand that pain because I constantly am being accused of being a boomer because nobody remembers Gen X is actually a generation that is in between millennials and boomers, and we do exist.
Yeah,
But yeah, no, I hear you because as a language teacher and as a humanities teacher, I mean, I've got my master's in education, right? I taught in the public system. I was constantly encouraging students to do something else. I was constantly
yeah, yeah,
encouraging students to get their GEDs and go live a life and take a gap year and go do
yeah,
something. Now, we were lucky because Lauren's brother, Keegan, he did exactly that. He graduated high school and left as soon as he could for South America for a gap year program, and he was, like, out the door, and he's like, "Bye."
yeah,
Yeah, it was great, and he learned so much from it. Now, he was a much more traditional learner. He came back, did a double major, graduated, and off he's gone. Lauren did the thing that I wanted to do, and I will forever be jealous of what she did, which is get her GED
dropped
and the
out.
yeah,
My
dropped out,
junior.
got a GED 2 weeks later and said, "Bye, I'm gonna go work and do something meaningful rather than sit here and be bored to death with the rest of these horrible
Yeah.
everything." It was Portland,
I
Oregon,
had a similar path
2011.
as you as well. I only did 1 year of community college, and, I was kind of like, "This is bullshit. Like, why am
yeah,
I here? Like, I need something more, and, I don't wanna go into debt for this." And it just didn't make it at that time in America, it did not make sense to continue going in debt. There was housing crisis going on, there was, inflation happening at a smaller level then than it is now, but it just didn't make sense, and so I wanted something different, and, um, so that I did.
Yeah.
yeah. Um, being a little bit older and also from, a depressing patch of desert, like, that affected me a lot because my parents were able to convince me on this fiction that the only path was, getting into a good college and then sitting in a
Mhm.
cubicle for the rest of my
Mhm.
life.
Yeah.
And they were able to
Yeah.
convince me of this because we didn't have like information.
No.
We had TV and that was it. And then
Mhm.
we lived in the desert. And so I just didn't know anything about what adults did with their lives.
Wow.
My mom was the librarian at the high school.
Oh.
My dad worked in a cubicle, and there were people like working at the Safeway and the Target.
Yeah,
And
very
Yeah.
that
traditional.
was
Yeah.
now I think, like, if I had known about like careers, I could have maybe done something with my life, but I had no idea what adults did. I just thought like it was cubicle or working at the Safeway or maybe scraping along cooking meth in a trailer somewhere.
No,
Yeah.
right.
I don't know, I heard that's
A little
pretty,
Breaking Bad.
yeah, Breaking Bad, you make some money doing that.
We had those people where I'm from, and it was
Right.
always on the table as an option. But
Yeah.
once I figured out that there were adults doing other things with their lives, there was no going back. But they
Yeah,
were
I
able to, you know, kind of convinced me that there were no other options for 19 years of my life
Right.
because there was just so little
Mm.
information about adulthood out there.
Well, we started traveling internationally with our children when they were 9 and 11 because we did not want them to miss out on opportunities. And both of them have stated, as a result of that first trip to Italy, they were like, "Yep, I know that I'm not gonna stay in a one-horse town." And we were
Mhm.
with
Yeah, 'cause
them
we
at the
lived in
time.
one.
We did. We lived in
We
a
lived in one at the time.
no
Yeah.
horse town in North Carolina at that time because we were doing basically a program equivalent to Teach for America. So our children, we always say that that was our Peace Corps years. And it was incredibly rural, incredibly stagnant. There were no community buses. It was just very much like you're saying, that was TV, tipping
Mhm.
cows, getting drunk, and that's about it.
Having
So,
babies.
and having babies. So I was glad then when we moved back after 5 years, we moved back to Portland, and they had more opportunity. Obviously, it's a more metropolitan city. West Coast cities, any type of city on the edges of the United States tend to have a little bit more of something going for them. Because I don't know, maybe people just like living by the water. But that brings me to another question because I have heard that you did a podcast when somebody was asking about the differences between Madrid and Barcelona. And I don't want to go
Oh,
into
yeah.
all of the details that you already answered on that podcast, but we will give a link to it when we post this one so people can go back and listen to that. But what I do want to know, and we're talking about, we're just shit talking the United States, which, deserves it a little bit. But what I do want to know is, what do you think are the best and the worst things since you've been here for 20 years about Madrid and then about Barcelona?
Oh man, I think you're probably referring to when in Spain with Paul Burge, and I
Yes,
did
I
an
am.
interview with him. I don't remember what I said in that, but that was several years ago. I remember sitting on a plaza in Madrid. We recorded that outdoors.
Ooh.
He had like a mic that he would just put under his mouth and then put under my mouth, and it worked. He had, I don't know, he's a real journalist, so he had some idea of how to do this.
Yeah,
Um, and best things about Madrid and Barcelona, or worst things about Madrid and Barcelona,
yeah.
I don't know.
Just,
It's so hard for me to detach from it and think about it as like a foreign place anymore. Because, if you'd asked me 10
mhm,
years ago, I could say, like, oh, yeah, when I was living in the US, I did XYZ, and now I'm here doing that. But it's just so much a part of me at this point. It's literally half my life that
right?
I've been in Spain, and it's,
Yeah, that's
my entire adult life that I've been in Spain. The lifestyle and being able to walk everywhere is something that I always, you know, sort of fantasized about back in the desert. Like you could
I can
really
Right,
do
you
imagine.
can't do
anything.
that.
Yeah. We had a Target eventually that was built about 3 miles up the road, and so I was able to walk 3 miles through the desert to Target. But
That's
that's not
fun.
like a practical plan for your afternoon most of the time.
No,
So yeah, the best thing is just being able to go outside and walk places.
that's awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
and I don't want us to, I mean, because this is our home as well now. But I mean, there's some bad things about it too. Well, I mean, maybe I could phrase it differently. Maybe the question is more so, if you were giving 21-year-old Daniel advice,
Oh
and
God.
to like what not to do and what to do, because choices, they all lead us to where we're at now. But if you could just go back and give that Daniel, say, don't do this, or this, just avoid this in Spain, what do you think that would be?
Um, Nothing,
Nice.
because as a 41-year-old adult, if I were looking back and telling somebody who's 20 years old, I would tell him not to do any of the things that I did. And yet it all worked out for me.
Right.
So in a way, 21-year-old Daniel was right about a lot of things.
There you
Yeah.
go.
With my wife, we were talking recently about just immigration in general, and because she gets
Mhm,
people from her town in South India who call her and they want to move to Europe,
mhm.
and the advice officially the advice is don't do it. Stay in your tropical paradise. Just try to make it work out there because here's the list of 25 reasons why living in Europe sucks.
Yeah.
And we both have to give this advice, but at the same time, we did none of that because living in Europe is awesome. And we also,
Right.
so the conclusion we came to is that we would never recommend doing this to anybody. But the
Mhm.
kind of person who's cut out for it is the kind of person who's going to ignore all of the advice anyway.
Right, exactly.
And that's exactly why they need to be the ones who do it.
Yeah,
Very well
perfectly
spoken.
said.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I know,
You said something earlier that I wanted to ask about too, as myself being curious of when it's gonna happen for myself. Um, you look upon, Spain as your home, you've been here most of your life, your adult life at that. When did that change start happening where you see maybe I'm assuming this, but maybe seeing the US as more foreign than Spain now?
I mean, the last 10 years, I guess, it's
Mm,
just been a gradual process. Now, I mean, once I got legal finally,
okay.
Yeah.
I felt much more stable about my life in Spain. Like I wasn't thinking I was going to get deported
Right, right.
anymore. I've been paying a lot of taxes.
Yes, we have.
And yeah, and just kind of, it's not that I love it as much as I used to, but it is my home. I've applied for Spanish nationality, which you know, could take another year or so to get approved, but
Yeah,
the application is there.
good.
And yeah, I would say that after 10 years, it started to feel like it was basically my whole life was wrapped up in Spain somehow.
So that's why they make that the 10-year rule when you have to get your citizenship, huh?
Oh,
They
maybe.
talked to you first and they said when. That's what
Yeah.
it that's interesting.
I
It's
mean, it's 2 years for people from
Yeah,
former Spanish colonies, let's say.
Yep,
yeah. That
But one of
includes
the
my
reasons for that
boyfriend.
is they've already got a lot of Spanishness going on in their
Yep.
it's kind of
cultures
an
and
apology too,
personalities.
though. Yeah, I think it's a big apology of sorry we invaded you and took you over, and here's citizenship if you want it.
Well, there's
Uh,
the other aspect of that is that the other Spanish speaking countries took in a lot of Spanish
Mhm.
refugees, perhaps
right,
exiles
right,
Yeah.
after the Civil War.
right.
Venezuela and
Oh
Argentina and
yeah,
all these places took in Mexico,
yep,
famously took in a lot of the sort of Spaniards who were escaping from the fascist dictatorship.
Yep.
exactly.
So they're kind of, repaying the favor in that way too.
Yeah. Well, that's a good segue to dictatorships because Franco comes from Galicia,
What
and
a
we
line.
we live in Galicia now, not that we live in a dictatorship anymore, but, there are a healthy amount of Franquistas that are still here in Galicia. But, I wanted to touch a little bit on another blog that I saw you wrote about the, pilgrimage to Santiago.
Oh yeah.
For our li yeah, so for our listeners out there, if you don't know, Santiago de Compostela is in the heart of Galicia, where Lauren and I now live out here in Galicia. We don't live in the city there, but there's a cathedral there, and it's called the St. James Way, um, or the Camino de Santiago de Compostela. And you can literally start in anywhere in the world, and there's famous routes that take you through Spain and through Europe. They start elsewhere, but then they come over to Spain, and you can go about 5 different ways. And then there's like on top of that, there's all these other mini little routes that go everywhere. And you end up in Santiago after you do this pilgrimage where you're walking and walking, or you're on horseback, or you're cycling, and you're staying along the way in these tiny little, basically hostels, albergues that you stay at, and you donate to keep them running. They feed you. They allow you to sleep there. Hopefully, you don't get too many bed bugs along the way because that does happen, especially now that the Camino opened back up since post COVID, and it just was just packed full of people. But St. James is he's supposed to be buried in the cathedral. There's a lot of debate whether or not that's really true, but I know from reading Daniel's blog that he completed the Camino starting from Madrid, correct?
I did not.
Okay, so see what's out there, what's written about you, that's not true. So did you completed it though? You did do the Camino or you didn't do the Camino?
No, I did part of the Camino.
Part of it, maybe that's what I read then.
I did the first several days of the Madrid Camino, but everybody sort of discouraged me from walking across Castilla.
Yeah.
Ah, yeah.
What time of the year?
I did it over summer, and I did it sort of on
Oh,
non-consecutive days. I would just,
Okay.
do a section of it and then take the bus back home and then continue the next week or whatever.
Right.
And yeah, it was super hot, but not, not for Arizona people, but for regular people, it was
USA.
hot.
Yeah.
And yeah, I did the part from Madrid all the way to Segovia. And
Oh.
since then, I've done sections of Camino in different parts of Spain because if you go to,
Mhm.
Cantabria, for example, you've got
Mhm.
sections of the North Coast route, which is
Right.
Mhm.
one of the more popular routes, but not the most popular.
No.
Here in Catalonia, if you are anywhere outside of Barcelona, you tend to come across sections of the Camino de Santiago.
Mhm.
I was in Puigcerdà and Llibia recently. Llibia is a tiny Spanish town that is across the border inside France. It's called an exclave
Wow.
Oh.
or an
Did not know that.
enclave. I couldn't, parse through the definition to decide if it's an exclave or an enclave. I think it's both. But depending on whether you're talking about it's an enclave within France or an exclave
Right.
of Spain.
For
But
Spain,
anyway, it's a
yeah.
tiny Spanish town, um, several kilometers across the French border that just for, historical reasons
Mhm.
ended up there. And, there was a section of the Camino de Santiago there that I ended up walking along without even wanting to. I just wanted to, explore the area. So it's
Lovely.
everywhere.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, Lauren, it runs right underneath your window.
Yep, yep,
Oh,
I'm in Vigo, so,
yeah.
a lot of people come up from, Portugal and the Portuguese way, and it goes pretty much right in front of our apartment, so I see a lot of people, especially in the spring and summertime.
Yeah.
Not I've not seen anyone in the wintertime, which is interesting,
Well, we just
but
did. So, Lauren, we were going up to Chantada, which is just north of where we live because we live north of Urense here
yeah, the
in Galicia.
Orense route is popular.
It's very popular, but the invierno route, which is the winter route, that goes through Chantada. And we were up there because my mom has now moved to Chantada. My mom is here now. We're just slowly, our family just slowly taking over Spain in tiny little pieces out here in Galicia.
Yeah.
And
It's called
so
chain migration.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's exactly what's happening.
yeah.
So she's here now. She has her little piso in Chantada, loves it. And we went to go visit her, and we saw two gentlemen walking through Chantada. And I had to ask Michael, I was my husband. I was like, "What's going on there?" He's like, "Yeah, don't you remember that's the winter route? It goes right through here." And I was like, "Oh, yeah, I forgot that." Because there's just so many different ways you can go. And if I drive down the street, I'm near one of the Camino areas. If I go to the vet over here, I'm right off the Camino again. It's just everywhere out here because once you get into the actual area of Galicia, it's just like little veins coming out
Yeah,
of
yeah.
Compostela. So you're just everywhere around there. You see it all, and it's fun because it reminds you I think it reminds you sometimes of one of the reasons that you do move to Spain, which is to rediscover and reinvent yourself. I have a friend that will later be on the podcast later this season who has a whole travel blog, and he says it's a reset button. Right, the Camino's a reset button. You reinvent yourself. You let everything go. You ditch it all, and it reminds me when I hear that type of language of why we all pick up and go and move, and to your point, Daniel, the type of people that do that Camino are the same type of people who pick up and leave and move to a foreign country and say, "Screw it, I'm just gonna go here now and see what this is all about." And I think it does take a particular it takes a particular person. You don't have to necessarily be on a religious pilgrimage to do this route, but it is something that a lot of people enjoy for many reasons. And one of them is the food. So,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, I mean, you read that article, I guess, so you may have noticed that I put in sort of the counter argument to this. I just had to Google again. The book Stealing My Religion by Liz Bucar, which, to be fair, I have not read, but I read a couple of articles kind of explaining the premise,
Yeah.
where, you know, I think the author herself was taking a group of American college students on the Camino. And, she goes home and writes a book complaining about how you're taking this ancient pilgrimage, which was originally something you should do to do penance for your sins,
Mhm.
and you're turning it into like a romantic consumerist journey of self discovery,
Yes, you are.
which has literally nothing to do with the original intention.
No.
Which I think is, it might be true, but it's also kind of a silly argument because nobody that I do takes the concept of sin seriously anymore.
Mm-mm.
Mhm.
Mm-mm.
And, everything is different than it was 800 years ago.
As it should be.
So expecting people to do the same things for the same reasons as they were in the 12th century is just, it's a losing battle if you want to make that argument, I think.
No, I agree with that. And what I also think that people that are enjoying this, it is contributing to tourism in Spain. It's also contributing to particularly tourism in Galicia, which for those of you listening who do not know, Galicia is pretty much the forgotten stepchild of Spain. We have another language here called Gallego or Galego, if you're saying it in the language. It is not a mixture of Portuguese and Spanish. It is actually a Latin-based language that Portuguese came from, and it is definitely a language where one can easily get confused, much like what I've been reading on how you have Catalan where you live, and
Yeah.
how that's can be very confusing. It's obviously what looks like a mixture of Spanish and French, but again, it's its own language, and
I used
it's
to think it
hard.
looked more like French. Now I'm not sure I see French in it anymore, but
No,
yeah, it's a language. I don't know.
yeah, yeah. Well, what I've noticed is I'm having a hard time sometimes stopping myself from adding the vocabulary of the Gallegos here into my Castellano because I'm learning local words and they're teaching me a different language, and I am having to separate that in my brain and say, "No, that's not how this is supposed to be. That's not what's happening." So, uh, that's something I think that's interesting that happens to people when they move, and especially, I mean, your wife's from a country that speaks a lot of different languages, and you can go from one area to the next area to the next area, and they're gonna have a variety of different ways to say things and completely separate languages. So, Spain, I think, is finally being discovered as being multilingual, but from native languages where most people outside of Spain do not know this.
I would think they don't. Yeah, I wasn't really aware of it, but before I came, but I wasn't really aware of anything about Spain before I came.
Yeah,
Like I
it's all
like I mentioned.
self-discovery, self-discovery. So, you recently wrote about another topic that I've been following in the United States. There's a huge migration happening that people are leaving California and they're moving to Texas, in particular Austin.
Oh, yeah,
And
I did write about that, sort of.
yes, and you wrote about how possibly another writer is thinking that Barcelona could be like the Austin of Spain, and
Or
people
the Austin of this decade, maybe, where people are
possibly.
going to pick up and move from, their expensive place in the US and come to Barcelona. Yeah.
Mhm.
But Barcelona isn't cheap. So I was very interested in that because Madrid, after living there for a year and then going to Barcelona, it seems like Madrid is less expensive than Barcelona. I could be completely wrong. And I sure as well know that Galicia and Andalusia and anywhere else basically in Spain is less expensive than Madrid and Barcelona. I understand people always want to go to the beach. That's why Barcelona is so what it is. And it's a beautiful city. Don't get me wrong. It's very eclectic. It's very foreign friendly. It's very tourist friendly, except if you live there. So I think, I'm
Tourist
not
friendly on
sure.
some levels, though, because there's good and bad everywhere. But from the locals here that I talk to from Vigo, the last place they want to go is Barcelona, and it's super interesting because all my friends in the U.S., the first place they want to go, Barcelona. So
Right,
it's an interesting relationship.
I remember, yeah, so there's a Madrid Barcelona rivalry, obviously, within Spain, which I guess is
right.
something I have talked about.
Mhm.
But there's also the separatism issue, which for
Yeah.
Spanish people is a very large issue that they feel strongly about.
Mhm,
So a lot of people here in Barcelona have never been to Madrid, and a lot of people in Madrid have never been to Barcelona,
mhm.
just sort of on principle, I think. Like, I'm not going to visit those people because it's a
Yeah.
big political issue.
Right.
As a foreign person, I don't feel as strongly about it as, the locals do,
Mhm, mhm.
obviously. And I have also forgotten if there was a question attached to this.
Yeah. No, but it's just basically what I wanted to know is, do you think
Oh, the new
that it will
Austin.
turn into the new Austin on a maybe global level?
I don't know why it would have to be Barcelona, but Spain could attract another million Americans.
Yeah.
Mhm.
We do have, like you said, a significant US population already.
Mhm.
But the number of like British and German people who have just been living in Spain for 40 years is
Right.
Mhm.
huge. They're
Yeah.
Yeah.
often not like counted because they might not officially be living in Spain. They just kind of
Mhm.
live here. The
Right.
EU makes it really easy for people to move around, and
Right.
um, the islands and the coasts tend to be just full of British and German people.
Right.
Because of the cost of living. And yeah, Barcelona is not cheap if you're trying to make do with a Barcelona salary, but there are 20 million people in the US who own homes that are worth $500,000
Right.
Yep. Yep.
with 500,000 euros. You can get a non-lucrative visa here
Mhm.
in Spain. You just throw some money at the government, or
Right.
show that you could throw some money around, and they'll give you a visa, and you can come out, and you can't work, but you can live here. And there's got to be millions upon millions of baby boomers, as we were saying before,
Right.
who could sell their house, retire in Spain. Like, I wouldn't recommend Barcelona for this if I was
Mhm. Mhm.
not if I was not attached to Barcelona for other reasons. I would easily think of like Valencia or
I was gonna
Malaga or Vigo. I like
Yep.
Vigo also when I've been there. I would go somewhere cheaper and not
Right.
deal with
Right.
Barcelona prices. But yeah, I think Spain in general could be a big hub for Americans getting out of the US
Yeah. Yeah.
over the next several years. I'm hoping to talk to Seppi on my podcast about this. Seppi Tabibian, she hit refresh. Oh, there's one.
see.
Going back to your thing earlier about the Camino being a reset button or what have you.
Yeah.
My friend Seppi from back in the day has a whole business called She Hit Refresh, which is for women who are moving abroad in order to, start a new life
Right,
in
right.
Europe.
And that's
And
amazing, and you
Amazing.
see more and more of that happening. There is another she is from Spain, and she lives on the Portuguese way, and, I her name is eluding me right now, but it's called The Wild Camino, and that's her blog and her website, and she does exactly that. She will take women that wanna travel by themselves, she'll take them on the Camino so that they can go and do this or teach them how to do solo travel, because one of the things that I do wanna comment about, and I think Barcelona is getting a bad rap, in particular, and some sections of Madrid, is that Spain is seen as unsafe. And being somebody that lived most of their life in Southern California, I can't even imagine what unsafe Spain looks like to me, because we don't have people walking around with guns. We don't have people even walking around with knives. We don't have people stealing. I live in a very remote area. I think when I lived in Madrid, I had a door person, and when I lived in Madrid, I never had to worry about the door being open, or nobody could get to my flat. But also out here, I literally could leave the door unlocked if I wanted to, and nothing is gonna happen. Now, that might sound really naive and romanticizing a period of time that my grandparents described in the United States, but I don't know if I see that changing as a result of immigration or migration within Spain. I see women being able to do more solo travel, be able to go out at night. I don't know, Lauren, you did this when your boyfriend was still trying to get his visa to get over here. You were living alone in Madrid. What your experience was, I think, very much that, walking at night.
Well, yeah, I think as a woman, though, you always are alert. You're always looking over your shoulders, especially at night in a city. I think that's always first and foremost. There's been a couple times where I had some weird guys following me. I mean, I don't know if I necessarily agree with all of that, and maybe because I listen to too many murder podcasts, I'm totally that type of person.
podcasts.
Yeah,
Yeah, so, I'm always looking over my shoulder, I'm always looking at what looks suspicious. Here in Vigo, though, I will say, I have not had one instance where I feel unsafe, um, which is cool. It's a smaller city, it's, like, barely scratching 300,000 people, but when you're in a city that has multi-million amounts of people, of course, my guard's always gonna be up, and that's just how I think I am, but of course, when I lived in Guatemala City, it was on, 3 times the amount of looking over my shoulder than I am in Madrid.
right.
So, I think it's just you have to be smart about your surroundings.
Yeah, completely.
Yeah,
And
just a quick note, learn martial arts, everybody
yes,
Right,
needs to learn martial
self-defense.
arts, especially men and especially women for
Yeah.
totally different reasons, but yes, everybody
right.
should learn martial arts.
Why
Just pick
don't you
one.
touch upon that? I mean, you said that you have teachers that were cab drivers and what, and like, what did you just say? Okay, I need another hobby, and I'm going to go do this, or I need a form of exercise, or was it just something that kind of called to you and said, I need to learn this?
Um, some girl dumped me. I felt pretty bad about myself for a
Oh,
while. I wanted to, punch something, and I ended up in a boxing gym, is essentially what happened. I wasn't expecting anything to come of it, and it
wow.
turned out to be this life-changing thing. So, yeah, I did boxing in Madrid, in Vallecas, which is you know, I don't think dangerous, but not the best neighborhood of
Not great.
Madrid.
No.
And I was in the, not the best part of Vallecas even. I was down at Entre Villas, which is like the part of
Mm.
Vallecas that, even people from Vallecas might avoid.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, I had a great time. It was kind of a mix of criminals, law enforcement, and weirdos from the neighborhood. So I was like the weirdo from the neighborhood.
That sounds like New York City.
Yeah, and it was just a very interesting experience. First off, because of the the actual, boxing and the sort of lessons you learned from getting punched in the face and then standing back up and continuing to
Yeah.
fight there. That's
Yeah.
something that the education system doesn't actually teach you.
No, no, it does not. It's got a problem.
Which is the first thing
Uh,
it should.
yeah.
But
What about
also
your
the
wife?
mix of people is something that, as an English teacher at that time, I didn't have a lot of contact with other segments of
Mm.
society. Everybody was
Mhm.
involved in education, either as a student or a teacher, and
Mhm.
going and hanging out with the other segments of society was pretty interesting. And that's been across multiple martial arts and multiple cities now. Like at this point, I'm doing jujitsu in a place in Barcelona, and we've got a guy who's a stevedore from down at the port, and
Wow.
people who are law enforcement, bouncers from discos, clubs, nightclubs, bouncers from nightclubs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Just a segment of humanity that I wouldn't normally contact in
Yeah,
my day to
yeah.
day.
But that's great though that you're doing that. And you're encouraging women, so is your wife also doing this with you, or
I would
does she
love
like
for
it?
her to do it, but no, she's not. She's not ready to get super sporty at
No.
this point. She's she just works all the time, so she doesn't have a lot of time to
No.
go and develop other hobbies at this point.
We understand that.
Yeah.
I think if I had my way, I just would be podcasting all the time because it's just fun, or writing, or doing all the things that just create my sense
Creativity
of
spark.
yeah, just it recharges my batteries. But work is that thing out there that allows us to do this, and I'm grateful for it every day. And I think what you're describing also, when you gain those new hobbies and you gain those new found passions, it opens up avenues into other communities, and you discover new people, you discover other opportunities from that. I have a friend in particular that I'm hoping that will agree to be on the podcast in a little while, and he lives in England, and he was always into contact sports, and he moved to England. He moved to London with his wife that he met in Vancouver, Canada, and he ended up becoming the what is it, the MMA cage fighter announcer, and he did
Oh,
that in London for quite a while as a result of doing this. So who knows? Maybe you have broadcasting in your future. You'll be announcing jujitsu matches. You
oh
never
God, I
know.
have no idea. I'm pretty new at jujitsu, and you have to actually know what's happening in order to announce it, I assume. Um, I started podcasting because people were telling me for years that I have like a radio voice.
You
Oh,
do.
yeah.
I
I would
agree.
agree.
Yeah. So I like avoided doing it for several years, but eventually just broke down and started one. And, I guess I'm announcing in a way.
Yes, you
And
are.
a
You're
very
announcing life.
successful one at that, yeah.
Yeah,
I have
absolutely.
a question. So, have you ever, as someone that has never done martial arts myself, have you ever been able to utilize it in a real life situation? Has there ever been a situation where you're like, "Fuck, finally, here we go."
No, I think the reason why you do martial arts is to understand why you really do not want to do that
Mm,
Yeah, that's
outside of the gym, because you've got these. Well, once you understand how violent actual violence is, you're
yeah.
not looking for more opportunities to like do it on a
I'm
street.
glad I'm glad you're not out there just randomly doing it, of course,
No,
yeah.
no, no, no,
Not
no.
That's
If,
like
a
on the
that's a
one
Street
nice
hand,
Fighter.
because like at this point, anybody who's untrained, I would just be bullying them, and that would be stupid
well,
Mm,
at this point. Like, because I've done several years of training, and anybody who has not done several years of training is just going to look totally stupid. So I'm not going to get involved in anything like that. And if they are trained, like also watch out. You don't want to fight somebody who is trained, because
right.
one of you is going to end up in the hospital or in
oh, yeah.
prison or something like that, and just
Mhm,
just don't
mhm.
do it. Fight with
Yeah.
the people at the gym who want to be there and who don't actually want to hurt you.
Yeah.
And
But
yeah,
you would use it in a situation with self-defense or something like that? Or is that still your last resort?
it is still your last resort. Your first resort is
Calming down the situation?
no, your first resort is not being in a dangerous
Oh,
situation to
yeah,
begin with.
that's
Yeah, I was gonna say running
that's the
away.
best advice.
Yeah, or it's like
Running.
if you're walking down an alley at 3 in the morning and you're drunk or high and there's someone
Yeah,
following you, you really need to decide what part of your lifestyle made it so you had to be there in the first place and
Yes.
not do that again.
That's
yeah.
and that's very, very wise because one of the things that we have noticed, especially out on the islands, is that going back to your point about the English and the German coming, and I have relatives in the UK, and I love y'all, but so many people come here and they treat the islands like their own adult Disney rave party, and it's just excessive drinking, excessive drug taking. They trash the cities and then they leave it and then they go back to their merry little way and they don't look at what happens to the rest of us who actually live here. And I'm not saying it's all of the people that come and visit, and I'm not saying it's just the Brits and the Germans because the Americans do too and so does everyone else. But what I am saying is that I do really believe what you just said about what part of your lifestyle is contributing to getting you into that situation, that you're arrested or that you're not no longer welcome to come back and you end up in a dangerous situation where self-defense is necessary. And um, I just, it's my little soapbox moment here is that I really agree with Daniel saying, and that people should take inventory of their actions before they go anywhere in the world and respect the culture that you're visiting, respect the laws of that country, try your best not to get arrested or in fights, and don't abuse your body while you're doing it because you're going to not like it and you're missing out on so much that you could be doing. And I think recently my husband and I, maybe it's because we're older now, but we were those people that would go to the warehouse illegal raves in California that everybody would go into and pay their $20 at the door, and it was a completely illegal dance club. And we now look back upon that and we think, what the hell? We would never have allowed our kids or wanted our kids to do that. But at the same time, we think that was great. It's like that love hate relationship with those parts of your life. And we were in Germany, we were in Munich, and we wanted to go see a band, but they went on at 2 or 3 in the morning, which is not, yeah, right. It's not uncommon here in Europe for bands to start that
Yep,
late.
yep.
And unless we're at a music festival, because we're avid music festival goers, we'll be in Barcelona, Daniel, in
Oh
the end
yeah.
of May for Primavera.
Oh
But
yeah. Primavera.
yeah, it's great. So I will stay up all night when I go to Primavera. Like I will go to bed at 5 in the morning because I have to see those bands that are starting at 3. But we decided, well, this time in Munich, we can either stay up and watch this band, or we can go to sleep at a normal time and get up, enjoy the rest of that next day, and not be hungover from either lack of sleep or one too many cocktails because you're trying to, have fun, so to speak. And we did it that way, and we had the best time because we just decided let's do that. Let's take a pause on what people normally consider what you do on vacation, and let's just enjoy the day for what it is. And I
Yeah.
have no regrets, and I think more of my vacations are becoming more and more in that way because I've done the other thing, right? I'm bored with the other thing. It's
Yeah.
already been done.
But having said that, and to your previous point, Spain is very safe. So my wife does have a lot of these sort of corporate, you know, dinners and Christmas
Mhm.
parties and things like that, which sometimes I go to, but often I don't. And if she's got to walk home at 2 in the morning in Barcelona, it's not ever been a problem,
Right.
really. She knows what streets to take and what streets to avoid, and there's always so much happening, even in
Hmm.
at the at night or in the middle of the night, that, it's not a huge worry that anything is going to happen. If you live in a specifically dangerous area, then of course things
Yeah.
can happen. Most places in Spain are not going to be specifically dangerous areas where you need to worry about that kind of thing.
No, no, and, and we lived in Lyon for a couple of years, and that's France, right? But it still felt more dangerous at night in certain areas than anything I've encountered in Spain. And I love Lyon, I love France, but it's different. It's interesting. It's like right next door, but it's totally, completely different. And I think what people also don't understand is that when you come to Europe, even though you have a country like Spain, Portugal, and France, all, neighboring countries to Spain, it's not like going from Oregon to Washington or Oregon to California. It's like so completely different culturally, and the way they do things, the dinner hour, all of it. It's 100% different than anything you'll ever experience in the United States. And I think that that's something that people have to get used to when they move over here. And you're in an area that borders France, and you have a lot of the influence coming from the border. But I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think that the Catalan influenced the border towns of France more than the other way around.
Yeah, I could definitely agree with that. I'll pull up the map really quick, but what we've got close to the border is not much. I've been to the French border in a couple of places.
Well,
Perpignan,
yeah.
for example. I found out when I visited Perpignan that it is part of French Catalonia, which nobody down here is talking about French Catalonia, but up there they're selling Catalan flags, and they're
Yeah.
sort of into the whole Catalan thing.
Amazing. Amazing.
Yeah. I mean, Andorra is there. They're, partially Catalan
Right.
as a nation. And the rest of this part of, I don't know, when people talk about the south of France, they're not talking about this part of the
No, they're
No.
south of
not.
France.
No.
So, yeah, this is pretty mountainous and rural, and there's not much going on
Right,
in
right.
this part of France up until you get to Toulouse, I guess.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Toulouse is probably the next biggest, because if you go into Basque Country on the other side of Catalonia, you've got Saint-Jean-de-Pied, and you've got Saint-Jean-de-Luz and Biarritz and all of that when you go out of San Sebastian going up to the area where you end up eventually in Bordeaux.
Yeah,
But
but
that's
Saint Jean, Pied de Port, and all of that, Bayonne, Biarritz, those are
mhm,
like small Basque
small,
Mhm.
towns that have nothing to do with, well, that are, they're sort of Basque, they're sort of French, they've got a lot
yep.
of cross-border influences.
And that's the thing that, again, getting back to the idea of these separate identities within Spain, we very much understand that now living here in Galicia, how they're very proud of their language, very proud of their culture. They consider themselves more of the Celtic community, right? Because that's their roots and that's where they come from. But the same thing with Catalan, and the same thing with the Basque and the Andalusians and the Asturians and the Valencians and everybody else in between. But Catalonia, that has a huge influence over the country because it has the second largest city in Spain. And I think that Barcelona may overtake Madrid in population in the next 10 years if the migration that is happening is going to continue. I don't see Madrid holding that center, or the focal point, being the focal point of Spain. And I could just be predicting wrong, but I see this emergence of people moving out of Madrid. And a lot of Spaniards are actually moving to Galicia, not just foreigners, but regular people coming out of the city. So I see the migration patterns happening. I'm wondering if that's going to change maybe some of the political atmosphere that people hold Barcelona in particular hold them hostage over for wanting to secede?
So Barcelona is a smaller city than Madrid. It's also smaller geographically, and there's
Yeah,
Mhm.
not a lot of room to expand. I would like to say that there's actually no room to expand Barcelona beyond what it already is.
yeah,
Um, because there's, this little bit of area next to the sea, um, which is Barcelona, and there's
right.
not, yeah,
Yeah,
there's no room
you would have
for,
to double the population for it to match Madrid, and I have no idea where they're gonna put that.
yeah,
They're
there's
gonna put it on the,
already,
perimeter. I think it's just gonna grow outside of Barcelona, and I think that it's gonna keep spreading up and down the coast. I mean, that's where all the people that I know that are moving to that area are buying on the outskirts.
yeah, that's definitely a thing. People who I know also, they're just buying houses in these random towns
Mhm.
up and down the coast. I guess that could happen, but it wouldn't be Barcelona particularly.
No.
The L'Hospitalet de Llobregat, which is just outside of Barcelona,
Mhm.
has, um, I think, the densest populated square kilometer in Europe is in L'Hospitalet, and several of the others are
Wow.
actually here in Barcelona. If you're just,
Wow.
dividing up the
Yeah.
map of Europe into square kilometers and counting people
Wow.
for
I
whatever
did not know
reason.
Wow.
that.
Yeah,
Wow.
it's very dense. Paris is also pretty dense as a city, but if you're doing it like neighborhood by neighborhood, I think Barcelona and surrounding areas kind of win. Like um we're in an area outside the center here, but our building is 10 stories tall and a lot of the other buildings are 10 stories tall,
Yeah.
and just packed people in here.
That's how I think that it's going to continue. It reminds me of the island of Manhattan in that respect, that you're just gonna get these skyscrapers are gonna continue, and
Yeah.
it's not necessarily a good thing, but I just as much as I love Madrid, and believe me, I love all parts of Spain, but I have an affinity with Madrid. I just really, really have always loved it. People always say, "Oh, Barcelona, Barcelona," and I do love Barcelona. It's beautiful, but it's completely different than Madrid. There's something about Madrid that it has always called to me. So we went there instead of Barcelona when we moved here. And then I fell in love with Galicia because it reminds me of living in California for many reasons, but the best parts of it. And, for our listeners who don't know, I live in basically what's the wine country of one of the regions of Spain. And I can't, I mean, I just can't leave this. This is amazing. But if I ever had to go back to a big city in Spain, it would most likely be again Madrid because it just has a really cool vibe that is underrated. But I don't see people valuing it as much as they value some of the other cities in Spain.
Also, cost of living has just skyrocketed over the
Yeah,
last 2 years in Madrid. I mean, it always has been more expensive, but it has skyrocketed
Yeah.
more than Barcelona in these
that's
last
true.
2 years. So,
That's true.
I know a lot of people that have specifically moved out here in Vigo and Galicia to get rent for half of the amount that they're paying, and they get
Yeah,
twice the amount of space, you know?
yeah,
So,
Yeah, I would love for the whole remote work thing to, sort of create a situation where people move back to some of the small towns,
yeah.
yes.
because there's a lot of towns that are just dying out there, and I
Mhm.
think
Mhm.
it's kind of depressing, when you see these things with the town where there's like two old grannies living there and nobody else
Right.
wants to move there.
Right,
Yeah.
right, and we
Um,
experienced that here because we remodeled our house, and everyone around us thought that we were opening a restaurant. They just didn't think, "Oh, you live in a house that what do you not why are you not living in something that's, uh, 800 square feet and part of another building adjoining to another stone building adjoining to another stone building as the little villages here." So we have a standalone home. We actually bought a small farm. So
oh, nice.
which is great. But when people saw the remodel, they immediately thought, "Oh, it's a restaurant." So we had so many people just driving by trying to look into the windows. It was quite hilarious. And I've put plants and things outside in the front so that it tells them don't stop in front of the house. This is not a restaurant. This is my house. But to your point, you can go 10 kilometers anywhere around me, and I'm going to find those villages, and I'm going to find those little grannies that are there, and nobody is there anymore. So that's why I also completely champion that thought that the remote work cycle, it will save Spain. And I think now you've mentioned this also in one of your blogs, and we've touched upon it here at Translate This, where the digital nomad visa has been released finally last year by Spain. And Europe in general is pushing this idea of work remotely. If you have clients anywhere else in the world and you can work remotely in Spain, we'll give you a visa to come and work here as well. And I think more people are going to be taking advantage of that, because otherwise it's the traditional route that the rest of us took, which is either come over and teach English oh, Lauren, what is the word that they call your group, the girls that come over in your group? Lauren's part of a group called Girls Gone International.
Girls Gone
And
International, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
and what is it that they're called? What's
yeah.
their official title? It's kind of like
I don't
an
even
au
remember, to be
pair.
honest, because yeah,
Auxiliary. I remember
auxiliary.
auxiliary. They
Oh,
Yeah.
the
come over.
auxiliares de conversación. That's a whole thing.
Yep.
Exactly.
I had no idea
Exactly.
about that, and then all of
Yeah.
them, like 5 of them, were like, "Oh yeah, I'm an ox," and I'm like, "What is that?" Okay,
Yeah.
Yeah.
so
So one of us can explain what that is. Which who wants to take that
not
one?
me, because I barely know anything about it. I just learned.
Oh, yeah, they have a program where they bring in sort of recent college graduates most of the time from the US, and they put them in Spanish schools to talk to the kids in English. And so they're not exactly teaching in the strict sense, but they are sort of providing, linguistic support
Yeah.
Interesting.
to get somebody with opening up a whole different can of worms, to get somebody
Right.
with a native English
So,
accent in front of these kids so that they're
Mhm.
not completely dependent on their Spanish teachers for English, I
Right.
guess, is
Right.
I
what
wish we had that in the US. That would have been nice, taking Spanish in high school.
taking
Yeah,
Spanish from a native
A native
Spanish
Spanish
teacher.
speaker. Yeah.
versus a person that was from Oklahoma that says queso or
Queso. Yeah.
Yeah.
biblioteca. That accent I didn't want to pick up. So
Yeah. I mean, they've been teaching English with a heavy Spanish accent in Spain since, I guess, for the last several decades. And
Right.
this auxiliar program has definitely made some progress in raising the level for younger people.
Yeah. Well,
But
and
that's awesome.
I think it's a needed situation because the world needs an accent and I don't say this in terms of being um I don't know, ethnocentric, but a neutral English accent is easier to pick up sometimes, because when I have actually taught people that have learned English in Europe, they come to me most of the time with some type of British accent, or more recently, I'm finding more and more people are coming to me with Australian accents, or New Zealand accents, but the Irish accent is mostly what I've been hearing. There's a lot of Irish English teachers in Europe, and it's actually, I think it's adorable
Interesting.
personally, but it is not the English that people now find to be in fashion. And and it's no way, like I said, being ethnocentric, but I think the American English accent, and particularly the Midwest, very neutral accent, is what people want. So there have been a lot of inquiries, because I'm on a non-lucrative visa. I have my business outside of Spain, so I don't work here in Spain.
ah,
And so my accent obviously is American. So when the Spaniards hear me, they, like you, they're running in just groups to me saying, "Please teach me how to speak English." And I tell them why I cannot do that, because I cannot legally work in Spain. So they just say, "Well, I don't care. I still want you to teach me English. Can we figure it out a different way?" Which is a whole different conversation. But I don't, and I really do want to live in Spain the rest of my life, so I tell them, "Just give me a couple more years when I will have my residency card, and then I can go into any type of tutoring that you like." And I won't do it full time because that's, again, we have a language company. We don't do that, in locally. I don't do it locally. That's not part of my job description. I'm looking forward to not working in the next decade. That's where I'm at in my life. So, but I do think that we'll see more and more Americans moving here. And to your point, not just the auxiliary program will be bringing them over, but the non-lucrative visa, the nomad, digital nomad visa. I think that will bring it over. I think the housing crisis, people won't be able to deal with the taxes, even if they have a $500,000 home, but they're going to have the taxes that go with a $500,000 home or the $1 million homes, and they're going to want something different because property taxes are almost nothing here in Spain. So they see that as an opportunity, and I do think we'll see more and more North Americans. I think the Canadians might even join us, and maybe the Mexicans as well, because it's easy for them, like you said, the 2-year visa. So
The 2-year nationality after
yeah,
they've
2
gotten a visa.
right, right.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't mention this earlier, but it's been mentioned on my blog. I actually just overstayed a tourist visa and
Mhm.
hoped that things would work out later, which is another thing I would not recommend anybody else do, but it
No.
turned out okay as far as that goes. It took me 7 years to get legal.
Mm.
Wow.
So,
Did you claim
now
asylum? How did you do that? And if you don't mind talking about that, can you talk about it? If you can't talk about it, we won't.
I can talk about it. Yeah, there's a program called Arraigo Social,
Mm.
which
Mm.
is if you are basically participating in Spanish society and you have an offer on a job, like an, a pre-contract, I guess,
Mhm.
basically a formalized written job offer, then they will give you a visa if you can prove a certain number of things. You have to be here for 3 years in
Mhm.
order to make that happen. It took me longer because, bad lawyers and
Ah,
bad advice and generally just being, not very organized myself for the first few years of that.
yeah.
But yeah, that's something that some people do. There's plenty of, my lawyers recently, now that I'm a person who can afford lawyers, like good ones, you know, my expensive lawyers tell me I don't need to say that I was illegal. I was more like in an irregular situation.
Yes.
So
That's
there are
good. That's
plenty of
good advice.
people, yeah, there are plenty of people who come here in an irregular situation and eventually make it
Mhm.
work. But yeah, if you've got all kinds of money, like all kinds of money basically means anybody in the US with an average with an average
Yeah.
salary, according to Spain, would have all kinds of money.
Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
So yeah, if you can make that work, it's kind of like I have very little respect for bureaucracy. They're going to
Oh.
take 20 years to get to the point where they've caught up with the fact that anybody can work through a computer.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Like I don't know what it even means now. Like I could be here in Spain and I could be teaching English to people in Cambodia,
Right.
or the person in Cambodia could be teaching English to people in Spain.
Mhm.
As long as the government can figure out a way to tax that, I think they should just let it happen,
Yeah. Yeah.
because with online it's going to happen anyway. And people are going to do it
And
Right.
people
in
have
the
been
regular way or in the irregular tax-free way, but
even
Right.
locals here have
Right.
been doing things the irregular way when it comes to taxes for a long
yeah,
time, and that's something.
practically the national sport is just
Yeah,
figuring out how to
yeah,
avoid paying taxes.
It
yep.
really is. And there is a very live culture, um, in Spain, and, because, they've come out of the dictatorship. They had to learn how to survive during those years. They had learned how to barter and hide money. And I remember we were here when the last day that uh, the peso was going to be legal, and they had to tell everybody, bring them to the bank and exchange them for euros. This is your last and final call. And literally, people here had money under the mattress still. They were hiding whatever they could hide because they were earning it off the books. And it's how they survived it, how they were able to go forward. But I don't fault them, because I think in the United States or any other country that has tax systems, I mean, and granted, Spain has a very a very big tax system, but people try to avoid paying taxes no matter where they live.
Yeah.
And that's just
Yeah.
that's life. People don't want to pay for what they don't think they're going to get. But what I always tell people is that when I do pay taxes in Spain, I can actually see what I'm getting for those taxes versus when I pay taxes in the United States. I'm like, what did I get for that? Like, I don't think I got much for that. And so I still would gladly pay taxes to Spain, to the United States. I have to pay taxes to both. I'm in a situation where I have to do both. So um, that's just that's what you got to do when you live here and you work elsewhere. And they're gonna figure it out. They're gonna figure out, like you said, how to tax people who work on a global scale, and they're gonna figure out how to make it profitable for the Spanish, and then they're not gonna care if you're doing whatever you're doing, as long as it profits the government and you live a happy little life here. They don't care.
Yeah. Portugal's already done the digital nomad visa
Yeah.
for a few years. I think they've already gotten to the point where they're sick of digital nomads and they're trying
Yeah.
to dial it back.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. I've
Mhm.
heard about that too.
But they were several years ahead of Spain. I guess Spain's gonna do this experiment.
Yeah.
I don't know if a lot of people have actually gotten approved for the digital nomad visa yet, because as usual, it's a bunch of idiot bureaucrats
Mhm.
who have just declared that they know how online businesses work and that they're uniquely capable of
Right.
deciding what is a profitable business idea and what is not, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I could rant about this all day, but letting
Ah,
your bureaucrats decide how business should work is kind of a problem, because the people who end up as bureaucrats are specifically the people who are avoiding the actual labor market and the pressures that it
yes.
involves. Like
Yeah.
Right.
the people who went and did a political science degree because they couldn't face the real world or something. They end up then they end up telling all the people who are in the real world how to live their lives. It's kind of a problem. But if we can navigate that, we might get a lot of online sort of businesses starting up here in Spain. That would be great too. But
Yeah.
the government tends to be sort of wishy-washy about whether they want business or not,
Right. Right.
and they make it hard for people.
Yes. Well, on that note, I think that is kind of brings us full circle to the beginning of why you left your desert patch, and now you're in a different type of garden,
Yeah.
and you're able to see the connections, but you now have the life wisdom to understand, look, no matter where you're going to be, there's going to be an issue. So just make sure you're happy where you're at. Would you not say that that's a good way to sum it up?
I think that being useful is more. Um, I think that being useful is a better way to put it than being happy, because you might achieve more happiness through attempting to be useful than you would through attempting to be happy.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Yes,
That's
service to
very
others.
good advice.
Yeah,
Yes.
service to others. The word service is, I don't know, it's all just words. Yeah, be of service to others if that's the way that you want to think about it. I just think that that's going to be a better long-term plan than sitting around thinking, what would make me happy? Because
Mhm.
Yeah,
if
yeah.
you just think about what would make me happy, you might end up doing something that's of no service to anyone and
Yeah.
then
Yeah, yeah.
wondering why you're
Good
not
point.
happy.
Yes, very good point.
Being
Very good point.
involved with community, I think, is
Yeah.
a huge, it's a huge thing that a lot of people don't give that much credit to unless you know it's
Oh
the
no, you don't.
traditional way that it's explained, like be involved in a church or go volunteer for someone in need. And it doesn't have to be something, in my words, so extreme. Being involved in your community can you can do it on much smaller ways, and you will see how it gives back to your daily life and
Right.
to other people as well.
Yeah. Which also,
Absolutely.
if you're in a walkable place, it's a lot easier to be involved
Yeah,
in a community because you actually have a community right outside your window.
yeah.
Yep.
If
Well,
They'll
you
you're
walk
definitely
in.
do. Both of you definitely do. You can look out your windows, you see that community right there. I look
Yeah.
out and I see pasture, but that's a
which also
community.
sounds nice.
It is. It is really nice. I think
Gotta make
the
friends
most
with the
exciting
cows.
thing, yeah, we see habali running by,
Oh yeah.
deer, weasels. We've seen weasels. That was the weirdest one.
What's the Spanish word for weasel?
I don't know yet. I haven't looked it up. I
God,
don't know. If
I
you
used
do
to
you
know
know?
it. Is it
I don't know.
nutria? Nutria is like a different kind of animal, I think.
Nutria's,
Yeah.
yeah, we
Those are like
have nutria up in Portland. We
yep.
remembered what those look like. Those are
Oh yeah.
totally
Comadreja. It's a
comadreja. Okay. All right.
comadreja.
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 Yeah.
Okay. What's dreja then? They're eating something. Comadreja.
No,
Is
no,
it
it's
like
just I think that's
literally
just the word
it's
for
just
it.
one word? Okay.
Comadreja.
Comadreja. Okay. Well, hey, look at this. We got you on Translate This and we learned a new word today.
All
Wonderful
right.
exchange. Love
Awesome.
it. Well, thank you so much, Daniel Welsh, for being a wonderful guest on Translate
Yes.
This.
Thank you
Thanks
so
for
And
having me on.
oh no, anytime, anytime. And we will be putting lovely links to all of your resources. You have a new book that you just put out, another one that's been published, and we're excited to
Yeah.
see what's going to continue. What is that one about?
It's conversations in English. It's conversaciones en inglés. It's just a collection of sort of typical situations and people in conversation back and forth, which you can use to get an idea of how English is, realistically spoken outside of normal textbooks.
See,
Yay. We need more of that.
we do,
Yeah.
and to his word, Daniel is a man of producing things that are useful. So he is
Um,
definitely doing that right now. So we look forward to reading more and watching more. You can see him on YouTube. You can follow his blog. You can read his books. You can read his published articles in Esquire and Lonely Planet. There's just
oh
so
yeah.
many places that you can get to read something that Daniel Welsh has been a part of and has created for all of us to enjoy and learn from. So thank you again for being on this. And Lauren, take it away. This is the end of another season episode of
Translate
this.
this. Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Have a good day out
you.
there.
Thank you.
Have a day.